Really great to have you all here tonight. We were so excited when we saw all the registrations coming in. Fantastic to have representation from across Australia. So every state and every territory has registered for tonight's webinar, and tonight you're putting into there right now where you're from. So exciting, and also across all different sectors as well, which is fantastic. Great to see people joining us from lots of different places across Australia. So I thought I'd just start off with, and we'll start off, can everyone just raise your hands? Let us know that you can hear us currently. Fantastic. Oh, great. Oh, that's so exciting. Sorry, I'm reading the chat box, because you're all being wonderful. On our way home in a train in Melbourne. That caught my eye. I'm a train girl. All right, let's make a start. Fantastic. So really excited to be here tonight from Melbourne. We're broadcasting and talking about the Education Action Plan. I'll give you a little bit of background to me and my enthusiasm for all things evidence. It started when I was 15. I won't give you the whole story. So when I was 15, I became very passionate and wanted to become a scientist. I did become a scientist, and I was fortunate to have this fantastic, passionate teacher who really believed in me and valued mastery, and he really pushed me to achieve. And I did become a scientist, and then I moved on to become a science teacher when I had a fantastic experience teaching 2 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students up in Queensland. And then I moved into different roles, and now I'm here in this one here today. So let's keep going. So I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the lands of the Kulin Nation today, and pay my respects to elders past, present and future. This is very meaningful to me and very meaningful to my work, the work and the wonderful knowledge that the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples bring to us. So this is an outline of what we'll be covering today. We'll be covering how we work, so a little bit of background about us, and then we'll be diving into our Education Action Plan, where we're going to spend the majority of our time today. We'll be looking at our evidence ecosystem, which is the key construct that exists, and we house our impact evaluation cycle and our wider evidence chain within that. And we'll be talking about something that I'm very passionate about, which is evidence-informed decision making. Within that, we'll be taking a look at our teaching and learning toolkit. So we'll be going to our live site and having a look at that then. And then we'll be also looking at practice-based evidence and how you can gather the wonderful evidence of the massive impact that you're making as teachers and leaders throughout Australia. So who are we at Evidence for Learning? We've reached over 12,500 people who visit our site 4 or more times every year. And we've reached out and presented to over 4,000 people. We're the licensee of all the material from the Education Endowment Foundation, which is headed up by Sir Kevin Collins. He was out here in Australia a couple of weeks ago. He did some talks up in Queensland and Victoria as well. They've now reached the point where 1 in every 3 students is involved in a trial to determine how something works specifically within that setting. We're funded by the Commonwealth Bank, $6 million to start in this journey, and also by the Berg Family Foundation, who fund for my position. We're also surrounded by an eminent and fantastic advisory board that includes Professor John Hattie, who really guides us and steers us in our work, and we're very fortunate to do this work. And we're really focused in on improving the outcomes for those in disadvantaged situations. So this is a bit of an outline of how we work, and it's through 3 key areas. The first being building, the second through sharing, and then we try to encourage use of evidence. And you can see everything that we can do here is underpinned by our drive to really help school decisions be informed by evidence. Looking here, you can see in our Learning Impact Fund, which is headed up by our Associate Director, Dr. Pauline Ho, who's actually running the chat box here for us tonight. So hello to Pauline. She is looking after the 4 trials that we're running, 3 of which are randomised controlled trials, and 1 of which reports at the very start of next month on thinking math. So we're very excited about the release of that. Pauline will be running her own webinar on that as the last in our webinar series. So join us if you're interested in finding out the outcomes of that really exciting groundbreaking study that involves over 6,400 students from South Australia. Then we'll be going through the Teaching and Learning Toolkit today. So that's an evidence base of 34 different approaches in education that's updated every 12 months. We'll be going to that in detail today. And what we've also done with that toolkit is tailor and map each one of those 34 approaches into relevant tailored toolkits for different settings. So for example, I know we've got people from Queensland, so we've mapped it to the National School Improvement Tool. For those of you in Victoria, we've mapped it to the Framework for Improving Student Outcomes. For those of you in New South Wales, we've excitedly mapped it to the School Excellence Framework, and these are all available and they're all live now. So in moving forward with your work, you can access those at any stage. So another key part of our work and what you're participating in tonight is reaching out to schools and working directly with schools, either through webinars or face-to-face workshops. And we've reached 4,000 educators across Australia with this since we began. So who doesn't love a quiz on a Tuesday night? I think you all love a quiz. So what we're going to do, we're going to start a quiz right now, and we'll do this live. I've just launched it, so you should be able to view the questions, and you just need to press true or false when you answer the questions. For those of you that are watching this later on, so the first question is, drinking 6 to 8 glasses of water per day improves student learning outcomes. So is that true or false? Great, we're getting the answers come in. Individuals learn better when they receive information in their preferred learning style, auditory, visual or kinesthetic. Feedback on how students complete a task is more effective than general praise. Well, it's very exciting seeing the results come in. And the greatest impact on student progress is teacher quality, so the greatest in-school factor, and grouping students by ability improves outcomes for all students. Now we've had 65% vote. It's pretty exciting here, watching the numbers go up. 78% vote. Oh, you're doing very well out there from all your states and territories. It's pretty exciting. All right, we've only got a couple of people that haven't voted. I'm going to close off the voting. I'll give you another, how long? I'll give you another couple of seconds and I'll end the polling. We've got 86% of you have voted, which is spectacular. All right, I'm going to end it now and we'll go through the answers. All right, great. I'm just sharing the results. All right, so, I like the even split. I like this very much. So yeah, drinking 6 to 8 glasses of water per day, you would think that that's a yes, but surprisingly what they found was that students that did drink that much had an increased frequency of bathroom breaks. So that actually decreased their learning. So that's a false. So it's a bit counterintuitive, that one. Now the next one. I love the split. We've got 50-50. We've got exactly down the middle. So what happened there is that individuals, we don't really think that learning styles are so much of a thing just because we can't reliably measure them, so that they will change over time. And also what can happen if you start to teach a student with a particular learning style, and they say, Miss, you know, you shouldn't be teaching me kinesthetically. I'm actually a visual learner. They can push back at you and you can actually, they can learn less. So we don't think there are other things that we think that teachers could focus their time in and use it more profitably. I wrote a whole super fun article for Teacher Magazine on that topic if you want to read more. I had such a good time writing it. All right, next one, feedback. 100%. People are just know their feedback. Yep, we know this from the work of Carol Dweck and others, and Hattie and Timberley. Beautiful work that we know that the more specific it is, the more the student will learn, because the more they'll know that next step to take in their learning. We're the same as adults. If someone gives us very specific feedback, we can action that, we can work on that, and that's beneficial. All right, grouping students by their ability improves outcomes for all students. You are all 100% right. That's a false. No, not for all students. It can be beneficial to the top 25, but that's in detriment to the middle and the lower. So there are other ways to do this. And as great teachers and leaders as yourself know, differentiation is a great way forward with that. So thank you so much for participating in that quiz, especially at this time of night. All right, so what we're going to do now is jump into our evidence ecosystem. And here it is here. Look, I love this. I love this because it places you as the educator in the middle of all our work. And what we have on the left-hand side, we have our impact evaluation cycle. That's what the education action plan is built off. It's an action research cycle for teachers or a school improvement cycle for leaders. On our other side, we have our wider evidence chain. So on the right-hand side of your screen looking now, the wider evidence chain, that's where the policymakers and the researchers live doing their very important work. Because I know we've got some policymakers and researchers as well on the line, so I'm very happy to have you here as well. So 3 key principles to this work. The first being that you yourselves as teachers and leaders are central to all evidence-informed practice. We're not going to have any evidence-informed practice unless you lead it at your school and you teach it in your classrooms. The second key principle is that by school leaders and teachers measuring the impact of their changes, of the evidence that they've introduced, that's really what we want to see driving the evidence and the research that's undertaken in the wider evidence chain. And we see this as being crucial to the work of leaders and teachers. And the third point is that both these cycles are mutually dependent upon one another for growth. We're not going to have growth within one side unless we have growth in the other. So you can see across the top, we're saying from the impact evaluation cycle to the wider evidence change, we really want your research questions as driven by educators, something you actually care about, to be driving the research and the policy that is created. And then we want that to be shared back in meaningful and practical ways. So this is all good, but I know myself. So when I was a teacher, I was taught at the senior secondary level. A call out to all my Queensland colleagues. I taught in Queensland, and I know myself, there was a real barriers to engaging with research. There's the demands, the daily demands of the work. Sometimes you didn't have time for lunch, let alone to pull out a research article. The second is that there's a real overload of information to process. So it's hard to dig through all the information and find the relevant parts to you to inform your practice, to improve your students. And then there's insufficient contextual information to really change that evidence into action. And the way and key bits of information such as what's the month's worth of learning progress and what's the cost to implement. So what we're saying here in our wider evidence chain, we're saying that in order for evidence to be useful to you as a profession, we think that it needs to undergo certain steps. The first being production, that's fine. And then we have synthesis. So that's where we have all the information being pulled together. We see this in the work of Mazzano, the work of Hattie, in the work of the Teaching and Learning Toolkit, which we're going through today, where you generate an overall effect size. And then we need transformation. We need additional information added, such as what's the cost to implement, because cost is important for schools. We all work within budgets. Also, what are key active ingredients I need to get right for my students in my setting so that this can have the best chance of success. And then we need engagement. We need for you as educators to reach out and have a look at the research and then say, okay, what does that look like for my kids, and adapt it for your setting. And then there's implementation, which is the really hard part. And that's what the Education Action Plan is all about. It's about helping to structure an implementation so that you have the best chance of success for your students. So if we jump back to our evidence ecosystem, and you can see we're going to focus in on our impact evaluation cycle. And there it is there. Beautiful. Here it is here. Now, what I'd like for someone to do is to provide me with an example of something that is a challenge for them at their school currently within the chat box, and then I can chat to this impact evaluation cycle to something that's of interest to you rather than just of interest to me. So chat away and see. Does anyone have anything that they would like me to structure action research cycle or a school improvement cycle around a problem of practice? I'm just going to give you a couple of seconds to type into the chat box. If not, I can just run with my own, but I think it always works a bit better if it's grounded in something that's important to you. Great. Oh, love it. Okay, fantastic. Oh, great. Lovely. Oh, they're both so nice. Oh, come on, you guys. These are awesome. Okay, so we've got a lot of great ones. I'm going to choose implementation of phonics in a lower primary. So thank you for all. Oh, they're beautiful. It's so hard for me to choose, it's like choosing between. Thank you, thank you, thank you. They're beautiful. I'm going to go with that because it fits in quite nicely for the seminar. All right, so the impetus, I assume, is wanting to improve, and the owner of that one can correct me at any time, is wanting to improve the phonics instruction at the lower primary level for a group of students. I assume that they have been noticing that they would like to see improved decoding, and that is what they're going to work on. Okay, so the impetus has been that they've looked and they've said, we would like to improve phonics instruction. We can see that our students aren't quite managing it quite at the moment. Fantastic. All right, so then in the awareness, you're asking yourself, what is the research telling me? Where are some evidence sources that I can go to and I can look and see what is a good way to implement phonics? So you could look at the Teaching and Learning Toolkit. I know we've definitely got a strand on that, and we can go through that as well later on. And then in the analysis, then you'll be saying, what type of goals do I want to set for these students in line with what I know about phonics? So we're going to do for example, not trying to be controversial, are we going to do a synthetic phonics program as part of that so that we can get students sounding out words that they're unfamiliar with? And then you're going to decide what you're going to adopt and what you're going to adapt based on your students in your setting. So this is where really your professional expertise meets the evidence base. And then you're going to act, evaluate and adjust. So you're going to bring in the new phonics program into your primary school, and you're going to do this thoughtfully within probably PLCs or a coaching model, because you know that that's a sustainable way to bring a new practice about. And then you're going to embed or admit based on the information that you found. So now, what we'll do is just Here we go. So what I was talking about at the top half of that impact evaluation is really the way we're going to do the program, and we'll talk that through today with our education action plan. What the bottom half is the evaluation process. So, and that's really looking at your practice-based evidence. All right, so our education plan, what exactly is it? So it's a way to structure your change. It will help you really to determine where you're going, how you'll get there, and what will tell you that you've arrived. And the way that we do that, and we'll talk through a specific example tonight, and it's as if that question was placed for me because I have based it on improving reading comprehension within primary age students tonight, but it's applicable to all of you within all your settings, but I'm just going to talk you through a generic example of that. So it's a way to facilitate evidence-informed decision-making and also the gathering of practice-based evidence. So here's our education action plan. And you can see in that first part, through impetus through to awareness and analysis, we're asking the question, where are you going? In the adoption and adaption, we're asking the question, how will you get there? What are the specific activities that you will undertake? And we've got questions underneath each section that will get you to where you want to go. And then what's going to actually tell you that you've arrived? How can you assess that and know your impact? So we're talking about different types of evidence. Evidence-informed decision-making is really evidence of what works for whom and in what circumstances. We'll be going through that with the Teaching and Learning Toolkit. And then there's practice-based evidence. And that's something that you're gathering as a practitioner. Now, in both of these, I really want to emphasise that they are both qualitative and quantitative. We're using both words and numbers because we need both to answer the below questions for ourselves and then a broader evaluation. We need both answers, and we can't get both unless we do mixed methodology. And I love mixed methodology, to say the truth. All right, so the first question we're asking ourselves is, has there been an improvement in students' learning? The classic know thy impact. The second is, how can we identify the active ingredients that are involved in the implementation of that approach? For how something worked in your setting and exactly how they worked. I'm going to deviate a little bit and just tell a quick little story about identifying active ingredients. So I was an evaluator working with the song room, and part of this study, as well as gathering all the numbers, was we talked to students, we talked to teachers, and we talked to principals about the impact that they could describe that the program was having on them. So I was in a room and I was talking to some kids, and I said to them, so what impact has the song room had on you? And one kid said to the other kid, oh, well, miss, I stopped bullying because of the song room program. And I went, really? Bullying? You stopped bullying? All right, I didn't say that actually. I kept quite a pan face, but there was another educator in there and we had shivers running up and down our spine. And I said, oh, okay, would you want to explain that? And so another kid said, yeah, he did. He stopped bullying me because of the program. And I said, well, why do you think, what was it about that? Because I was fascinated. I was thinking, really? How does that work? And the kid said, well, miss, I stopped bullying because I was put in a position of authority. I was running the drumming circle. So I just stopped bullying because I was in charge of something. And so what we found as a key active ingredient for this program was actually placing students into positions of authority that actually were demonstrating some quite negative behaviours. And what they found was a reduction in those negative behaviours. So that's an example of an active ingredient. You'll only find this out for yourself when you make a change in your school by talking to people, which is a wonderful thing to do. So here's some examples of what evidence looks like. This is drawing from that project. So we looked at 12 different schools across, it was in southwestern Sydney. So hi to anyone from southwestern Sydney, particularly tonight. That's the themes and outlines from the case studies that we conducted in 4 of the schools. This is some of the data around absenteeism. So we saw a dramatic increase in student attendance around when they had a song room day. We also saw an impact on the all the results from NAPLAN in terms of reading, writing, spelling, grammar and punctuation. And we also saw a similar improvement in their grades. So significantly higher grades in English, maths and science for those in the song room. So that's just an example of the types of evidence that we can gather. We also gathered and calculated effect sizes. So it was a 0.77 for 1 year in that. So what's evidence-informed decision-making? I love this from this quote here from Professor Jonathan Sharples that just really is eloquent around that. And he's saying it's about integrating professional expertise with the best external research. And not about prescribing what goes on from an unchallenged authority. So in evidence-informed decision-making, we're really asking you to bring all your professional expertise to the table prior to making a decision. And we value all of that. I value that incredibly as having been a practicing teacher myself. So this is a hierarchy of the evidence that we can be presented with that we recently published with the Centre for Strategic Education. This is a diagram that we put together, and you can see at the top of the triangle we have systematic reviews. This is where we draw together all available information from across all the different studies, and we make and pull it together, and we make a one effect size from that, and we'll be breaking that down a bit more tonight. And I am passionate about effect sizes. I'll just throw them out there. We've got randomized controlled trials. We're running these at the moment. And that is where we randomly assigned a student to the program or not. I've just written a piece on this as well if you're interested in randomised controls in further detail. And also quasi-experimental design. That's the type of design that I use for the song room study. We're also, within realistic reviews, we can get down to promising practices through case study research. That actually identifies what is working and what's not working. And in that level 2, we're definitely saying alongside that should always be your case studies, or else we're not going to find out the how. And without the how, the numbers doesn't give us all the answers. And then emerging practices is really where we're codifying specifically how something can work within a certain area. And we're getting down to basically defining the terminology involved is one way of putting it. So that's a hierarchy of evidence that we've developed up. And we'll be talking about effect sizes. So what I've just thrown up there is a diagram, and that shows you the standardized curve with standard deviations. So that's 1 standard deviation, and then 2 standard deviations, 3 standard deviations, just to get us all happy and excited about effect sizes. So what's so good about effect sizes? Why I like them is that they help us to measure the magnitude of growth. So we can track that over time, and it gives us a nice indication of growth over time, which we can't do with other statistical measurements. So it's just the difference between 2 groups, the means in 2 groups. So for example, if we've got students in thinking maths minus students that aren't in thinking maths divided by the pooled standard deviation, that's how we get the effect size. Mean is the average of the numbers. Standard deviation is the variance in the population. You can see that in our diagram on the bottom right. This is what I like, is this effect from this quote from Coe saying, what is nice about it helps us move away from the simplistic, does it work or not, to the far more sophisticated, how does it work and in what range of contexts? And that's what we're able to do with an effect size. So we're talking a lot about effect sizes and about variations in that. And I think this is a nice diagram here. It's looking at a different context, but the same idea is that we have a myriad of studies that are performed to look at something. This is looking at whether substances are protective or causative of cancer. We can see on the right-hand side, we can see those that are causative of cancer, on the right, those that are protective of. Now you can see that, and we're not that far from the weekend for a bit of good news, we can see that wine is mostly in the protective against, but we're not looking at any cardiovascular, and we know that there's a dosage definite effect with that. Butter and beef, not such a good story. I'm not sure what you all had for lunch, but I did have a little bit of butter in my sandwich today. So it's letting us know there's a lot of varieties that are underpinning mean weighted effect size, and to bear that in mind when we're looking at the toolkit data tonight. So what's practice-based evidence? There's a lovely article by Bryke that I just love. And really, it's quite simply evidence to help us discern whether any specific changes are actually improvements. And that's what we're talking about today. Have we made an improvement? So we can capture that within our impact evaluation cycle and our evidence, our education action plan from our evidence ecosystem that I've talked you through. All right, so let's recap on our impact evaluation cycle, which is, where are you going? Is impetus through to analysis. How you get there is adopting and adapting. And we'll be going through specific questions that you can answer in response to this for each step. And then what will tell you that you've arrived. Okay, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take you through our education action plan that I previously prepared to take you through all of the steps involved. These are free to download off our website. The link is just there at the bottom of that screen, so you can just download it and fill it out. It's one large PowerPoint slide that has all these questions in it, has these examples in it as well. But I thought we'll talk it through today to get a good idea of some of the thinking around that. So we start off, as you started off in that chat box, and what I was really excited to see is that you all had a really good idea of a challenge that you were facing, and were also willing to share that. So thank you to you. And that's what we want this whole work to be grounded in, is that what's relevant to you, and really coming from it, not from a solutionitis perspective, but what's relevant for you, for your setting, for your students. You know that intimately as teachers, as leaders, as policy makers, and then you can work according to that. So what are some of the challenges to improving student growth? What we've got in this school is limited and inconsistent growth in reading comprehensions from level year 3 to year 5. Okay, that's the challenge that this school has identified, our fictitious school. Now the next is we're going to move on now and define the goal. So, and define the student cohort. So really important in this work is to be specific as possible, because we know the more specific we are around goal setting, the higher chance we have of achieving that. So this school is aiming for 95% of the year 5 students will reach the national minimum standard for reading. Fantastic for that school. Now, at this point, the educator is asking themselves the question, what does the evidence base say about improving reading? And they've said, I can access the teaching and learning toolkit as a source of evidence, and that's what we're going to do. So we're going to go onto the live website and have a look specifically at what we can see. Okay. Great. So we are now on the website. So you can all see that website in front of you, and you can jump on yourselves as well, but I'll walk you through. Let's jump on the toolkit. So there's our build, share and use. We'll jump on the toolkit. So this is free. Let's jump on the all approaches full toolkit. Great. So what we've done here, and you can see, you can sort according to name, average cost, evidence security, and months of impact. The name is pretty self-explanatory. We've got 34 different approaches in education. The average cost outlines specifically how much something will cost in your setting for your students. The evidence security is a measure that lets us know how much we can trust the evidence. So if it's got the higher the padlock rating, the higher we can trust that evidence. While our months of impact tells us is a translation of effect sizes into months worth of learning impact, because we think that that's a more accessible way to think about and for people to access what an effect size actually means for student growth. All right, so what we can do, we can sort according to any one of these different settings. So what's more important to you? And what we're going to do now is just have a little poll to find out what you would like to go and see the most within the Teaching and Learning Toolkit. So what do you want to deep dive into the Teaching and Learning Toolkit now? And we've got a choice of the we've got 5 different. So if you just let us know what in the chat box, what is the approach that you would like to see us talk about and deep dive into. So I'm just going to have a look. Feedback, yep. Feedback, yep. Excellent. All right, let's go with feedback. I must say, yeah, feedback, please. Love manners. Everyone loves manners. All right, fantastic. Let's do feedback. Fantastic. So I will sort according to name. And let's jump into feedback. What a fantastic choice. All right, here we go into feedback. All right, so what we have here are our headline measures. So we have our average cost, which is low, our evidence security, which is quite high, 3 padlock rating is good, and our months worth of impact, which is a spectacular plus months worth of learning in comparison to on top of normal learning for that year. So it's quite spectacular. We're not saying that if you implement that exactly, that's what you'll receive. That's why we're saying you need to measure your own impact. But we're saying that that could be possible. So what are the headline measurements that we have? We have what is it? How effective is it? How secure is the evidence? What are the costs? And what should I consider? So I'll scroll down to that. The what should I consider gives you the most practical advice around using and turning that evidence into action. So in turning feedback into really practical way of using feedback within your classroom. Now, let's jump to, because I can't resist, the references, which to me is the heart and soul of the toolkit. And they're just coming up now. Here they are. Okay, great. And we are about to move these to online, but at the moment they're a PDF. So we've got our mean weighted effect size. So that's calculated by adjusting for the number of students in each study, each of the different studies, and then coming up with the 0.63 effect size, which we've translated into 8 months worth of learning progress, because we think that that's a more tangible way to look at that number, and that makes sense to educators. And then what you can see, if you scroll down, you can see each of the abstracts of each of the studies that were involved in this. So it lets you know a bit more information about them, and you also have hyperlinks to each one of those. Now, if we click back from there, I do love my technical appendix a great deal because I love effect sizes. So what we've also done is, in conjunction with the Melbourne Graduate School of Education, it was the Centre for Program Evaluation that did this work, Janet Clinton's group there. They looked at all the research for the past 6 years of each of the 34 different approaches, looking to see what the evidence base was like in Australia and New Zealand. And what they found was that there were some areas we didn't have a lot of research in Australia and New Zealand. So for an example of that was feedback, and I'll show you to what we developed in relation and in response to that. But what we also found was that there were some areas that we saw a lot of Australian and New Zealand research, and that really contextualised the findings within the Australian research base and really looking at specific programs. So for example, in the arts participation, we found that we knew that, say, in southwestern Sydney, if we implemented the So Wrong Problem program, we saw an effect size of 0.77, which was above and beyond the +2 months that we've seen in other areas. So that is the Teaching and Learning Toolkit. So then what we've also done excitedly with feedback is we worked with AITSL to develop the feedback implementation materials, and I'm taking you to that site now so you can click on that. And what you can see here is that we've developed a lot of different resources to help with implementing feedback, including case studies, and also including an evaluative approach to measuring feedback. We've got surveys in there. We've got some really interesting material. So, and if any of you want me to talk to this in more detail, just reach out to me. At the end, my email will be provided, and I'm happy to provide you with my favourite resources, but a lot of them are great. And we will be talking about feedback in more detail in an up and coming webinar where we'll really be breaking down some of those key resources. So that's really exciting in terms of feedback and an excellent choice to go to. And if we just jump back to the PowerPoint now, what I've done here is I've put onto a graph, not dissimilar to the way that I was looking at before, the substances that were protective for and actually causative of cancer. I've done that, but looking at the effect sizes around feedback, and you can see that there's quite a spread of them. And then if we look at an ad, there's our mean weighted effect size right there, which is quite nice just to look at visually. So this lets us know how different educators across Australia have been talking about the toolkit. And I just saw a question, and yes, we'll send you out this webinar. We'll send you out this this presentation and also video recording as well afterwards. And I understand children in the ear. I can hear mine in the background too. So, so these are some lovely things that some of the people that have been working with our toolkit and had a lot of success with implementing around the toolkit, especially Kath Perrier. She was on the Today Show talking about how her implementation of feedback has caused a lot of growth in her maths scores over time. So it's really exciting just to see that it is useful and it is making a difference, because that really is why I wake up in the morning, hopefully that we are making a difference and that it's helpful to you as practitioners, you the ones driving the change. So how are practitioners across Australia using the toolkit? We have them using professional learning communities. That's a symbol from the Victorian department, but and there is a Victorian school that is using them specifically in their professional learning communities to inform those as they pick a new topic and move through them. We're also having, it was a school in Victoria presented this idea to me, which I thought was a really novel and beautiful way to use the toolkit, is that they're listing the higher impact strategies such as feedback and metacognition, and they're asking themselves, do we have that within each of our lesson plans? So I thought that was a lovely, elegant use. It was Amy. Call out to Amy if she's on this. What also is that leaders and teachers, so you can use it in presenting to your staff. This is the reason we're going to move forward with this particular way. This is the evidence base behind it. So good in introducing a new topic in staff meetings. Also in starting conversations with parents. I have a great example from southwestern Sydney, a principal there, a principal that I've been fortunate to work with for a long time, was telling me the story about how he had a parent approach him and they said to him, oh, you know, we really want to keep our son down a year because he's just not coping. And he said, well, might not be the best thing. And he showed them the evidence on the toolkit. And what that says is that that isn't generally a good idea. What we see is a decrease in learning outcomes for that student over time. So he was able to convince them successfully not to around that. So that's some of the ways that people are using the toolkit. Now, jumping back to where we were, which was, okay, what does the evidence base say about improving reading? Well, there's 3 strands that directly relate to this. And we also dived into feedback, which is really important as well. So that's a summary of that evidence base specifically around reading. Now, the next step in our impact evaluation cycle and our education action plan is, well, when we're thinking about implementation, what does the evidence base say about this? And we've done a paper around that as well. And we know that providing ongoing support to teachers is the best way to improve students' learning outcomes. We've done this in implementation studies internationally, and you can see with or without a coach, you see greater gains with a coach, you see greater gains with observation. So the link to that paper is just down there as well. And then thinking about when we're setting our outcomes is how exactly does change occur at a school? And it happens the same way really it occurs in any industry. And the first is that we really work on changing the way what people believe and think. And then the second is that we change people's skills, and the third we change what people do, and the fourth we change in students' learning. So that's when we see the outcome. So that's the model of change that we see. So it's really teachers, leaders and students thinking there could be a different way. And I had a wonderful question in the chat box that I can't resist answering right now, which is, what about the impact cycle in looking at working with students? And I was like, that's got to be a plant, because we're working with that impact evaluation cycle actually with students as the agents for driving change within the school, with them looking at evidence of their reading over time and them being the ones to structure a change project based on that evidence in the Northern Territory, with a group of 17 schools up there being led by John Cleary. So definitely, yes, student voice and student agency can definitely be employed in this, and there's an article I'll link to at the end that you can read that goes through what we've been working with that. I'm a massive advocate for listening to students, as they are the person that receives our teaching and they are the ones who are learning. So asking them is a fantastic idea, and having them drive change is incredibly powerful. Yeah, it was incredibly powerful Friday where students were presenting to all other students. So there was 115 students in the room, and they were all presenting their change projects based on their evidence of what they're going to change within their school based on the impact evaluation cycle. So very moving. All right, so back on our short-term outcomes and looking at, we're looking at changes to attitudes. Okay, so teachers and school leaders' attitudes, and we can also be talking about students as well. And within that example, in Teacher Magazine, it's talking all about the students. So write our midterm outcomes, and that's where we're measuring the actions. What are the difference in the actions that they're taking? Are we seeing more phonics-based instruction taking place in the classroom? What exactly, specifically, does that look like? How are we measuring that through surveys, etc.? And then we've got our long-term outcomes, and that's when we start to see improvement in our outcomes of our students' growth over time. So what are the plan of activities? So this is the plan of activities for these. They're going to work in professional learning communities. Teachers are going to co-plan. They're going to be coached to employ effective reading instruction strategies, and they're differentiated according to the different learners within the group. And teachers are going to track their students' learning progress in response to this approach. So in adoption and adaption, what are some things that we need to do in order to make sure this happens? Well, we need to provide the teachers with the time to actually be able to do that work. And I've seen this modelled lovely in a school in Victoria, Keilor Heights Primary School. I had a pleasure and talked to them there about their PLCs and the beautiful work that's being led there by Helen Butler, the principal. So, and then they're asking the question, how are you tracking against your short-term, long-term, mid-term outcomes? And they can say, we're doing a great job. You'll have different trackers and different ways of measuring. And this is really that practice-based evidence step where you're gathering that. If you're not seeing the desired outcomes, what adjustments can you help to make to achieve your outcomes? So we can ensure teachers' practice is supported through peer observation and peer feedback. Just had some lovely work come out of the UK around how much of a difference that type of feedback can make. All right, and then other outcomes are intended or not. Currently in this project, there have been no unintended outcomes, but we're always looking for unintended outcomes. They can be either positive or negative based on the evidence that we're receiving and what are the overall goals for this project. And I think they're a wonderful thing. I read a piece once that was just beautiful about unintended outcomes. If anyone wants to know more information about that, happy to share. Love unintended outcomes. There's nothing wrong with them. Sometimes they can be very beneficial, and we need to be honest about the work that we're leading in order to make change, in order to make improvement. So based on the outcomes, then we decide, do we embed or admit? Because we know that schools are busy places, and if it's not working, we need to be honest and say, we're going to admit that. Or if it's working, please, can we scale this up, not just for this school, but across Australia? Can we do that and improve outcomes for all our students? Wouldn't that be wonderful? And we're working with some schools to document current practices in case studies of exceptional practice that we're really looking for that to have a deeper reach across Australia, because I know how awful hard you're working in some beautiful, I've seen some remarkable practice across schools. All right, adjustments and additions need to make to the activities to ensure the process is sustained. So ensure the time is allocated, and how we're going to spread this across the school because it's working so well. We are going to set aside time for teachers to observe each other's practice and provide feedback to each other. I've heard teachers say that when I was running a case study, that how effective this can be in terms of them making small incremental changes that improve the learning for their students. And that's what it's all about. Ensure the coaches work with the teachers to make sure that effective practice is spread, and that one-to-one feedback straight after or before a lesson is incredibly effective in leading to improvements. And we've just, in a way of conclusion, this is an article that I wrote with Pauline and John Cleary, who is the principal who's leading that work up in the NT with those 17 schools. And so this is what it's all about. It's about thinking through the why, the how, and the what of the process prior to beginning, and then using that education action plan to track your progress. So you can focus in on what's important for your school, and you all had a good idea of that when we started today. So then you're using evidence to inform your plans, and then you're excitedly gathering practice-based evidence to see whether or not you've had the desired impact that you wanted to have. And it's a continuous cycle of change, so it will take you 1 to 2 years in implementing a certain approach to determine whether or not it's had an impact for your students in your specific setting. And then we ask you to share those practices with us so that we can share more of this across Australia. So we're going to beautifully now have a couple minutes for questions, and I'm just going to have a look at some, if I can answer these. Yeah, great, thanks. There's a great question here just asking about months of growth and effect size. So, and I can take you to the website now actually and show you the answer to that. Take you to the site now. But what we've done, so we've taken the effect size and we've said that 1 standard deviation is equal to a year's worth of growth, and then divided that 1 standard deviation by 12, and that's what gets us to a month's worth of learning progress. But I can show you the actuals where that is on the site to find. And I'm just looking that up now. Great question. Here we go. All right, I'm just going to. And you can see there, that's the translation from effect size into months worth of learning impact. So that's very transparent. I've also written a recent article if you want more information about effect sizes and in response to some of their arguments raised against it. Yeah, great question. I think, so there's a question here, what assists educators to refine which evidence in their context is going to help them improve those student outcomes? I think that's very much based on the qualitative evidence, because that will let us know what's working best for what students in what setting, and will also give us more nuances about how it works specifically for different students. Yeah, great question. Is it any different from the 0.4 hinge point that was John Hattie's lovely work has defined? We define a moderate as 0.19 onwards, because what we're finding is that in real life settings with randomized controlled trials, that is what we're finding to be most of the effects that we see. So it's a bit more of a shorter cutoff as well. And then there's arguments, which we won't get into right now, about if then we think about different students at different ages as well, make different progress, and that's another area as well. So yes, oh, awesome. I'll send it through to you. So someone's asked me about the unintended outcomes article. Just email me, and what I'll do, I'll pop up on this next slide now, my contact details and ways that you can follow in more of our work, because I'll be more than happy to send you that article, because I love that article. And just happy for someone to be as interested as I am too. And thank you all for joining us here tonight. So if you want any more information, join us, join our Evidence Informed Educator Network. Some of you would have heard about the webinar series early because you're part of that network, and we'll continue. So we've got another 5 webinars in this series, so feel free to join us for that or look at the recordings. Subscribe to our newsletter for updates. We try to keep that really condensed, and we generally have at least 1 new piece of writing within that. And follow us on Twitter. I'm on Twitter as well, and more than happy to connect with you personally on Twitter as well. And we're on Facebook as well. And any comments and feedback, directly to my email, please. So any requests, and we'll also send out a full version of this PowerPoint as a PDF with clickable links to all the articles. And we finished perfect time. And so I guess I just want to end off with thank you so much for being here tonight, and thank you for all the work that you do in schools that I'm privileged to see on an almost daily basis. And we're really about being useful to the profession, and that's why our resources are provided free and unrestricted. Thank you.